Folks online, we're going to start in just a few minutes.
You hear, oh, ha-ha.
Ha-ha. Yeah, that's good.
That's pretty loud. Somebody turned me up really loud.
So,
Okay.
can you hear me? So I would just ask, if you want to continue to talk, please take your conversation into the narthex or take your conversation outside. If you want to join this conversation, please come over here.
Yeah. That sounds good.
I don't know how effective that was, but I will go find some people. All right, y'all are being quiet. There's a lot of background.
It's so funny. I'm not used to sitting while I'm leading. I'm just like, oh, no. I'm used to standing. So it's just a little, yeah, it's fine. Excuse me. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll just thank everybody else for creating space for our conversation. I'm so glad to be here with you all. When Sherry asked me to do the adult ed, she talked with me about it. I said, well, what do you think we should talk about? What's needed? And I asked her a little bit about what's happening kind of current event-wise, and I know that you all have quite a bit of a new update going on with, right? And I thought, well, this would be really important. And so you see, I kind of tilled the ground in the sermon to talk about the relationships that we have with our neighbors. They do carry. Voices do carry.
I know they're not talking really loud.
Oh, it's okay. I have a feeling that there are folks that are already doing that much better than me. And I can hear that my voice is, somebody's turning me up even louder, which is really great. One of the reasons why I feel like this conversation is important about understanding about relationship and how we're relating to our neighbors is I think that you and I have quite a bit in common. In my last congregation, I was pastor of First Covenant Church, Minneapolis. Trellis was the developer that helped to establish the affordable housing on the same lot as First Covenant Church. And so I know quite a bit about where you are and about the dance, and not only just building relationship, but building community, and what do we share and what don't we, and all of these things. And one of the things that I and several of us really felt was most important was about establishing relationships, right? And that's really important, I think, because as we're talking about relationships, that's kind of a buzzword. I say relationships and we all kind of nod our head because we kind of assume that we know what I mean. But relationships are kind of like a buzzword, like other things that have different meanings. Like, I'll give you another one. The word love is a word that has multiple meanings. Even biblically, there are 5 different types of love that are shared in the Bible, right? There's familial love, there's friendly love, there's agape love, holy love, right? There's romantic love, right? And so, and then I think about my own children. I have 5. One of my daughters was here with my wife. When she says, I love something, it doesn't always mean the same type of thing I do at 47, right? I mean, so all of these different nuances to the word, are attached to this definition, and we kind of make an assumption, right, that we all understand what we mean. Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. I love that. Do you love that? Right? I mean, you don't even, and it's all about the nuances that are here. Think about the same thing with the word missionary. We don't even use that word in the ELCA anymore, right? Now it's become accompaniment tour, right? But this idea, here it was again, missionary had a really important, powerful meaning before it was hijacked. It became more about going to fix and to save. And so now when people say they're going on a mission trip, immediately there are many people that make a connotation that may not be what the person meant, right? Because some of these words, a lot of these words are subjective. And so when I say that relationship is important, I say it's important because we have to make sure we're on the same frequency. Otherwise, how do we know? You think about the word friend. As a pastor, there are so many people. I can think about how we, will send an email out and say, hello, friends. Hi, friends. We're friends. It's friendly. We're friends. Good morning, friends. And we assume, right, that everyone kind of understands what this word means. But here it is. Friend can mean acquaintance, right? It can mean colleague. It can mean parishioner. It could mean something more than friend. When I look up in the dictionary, I think about what the word friend means. And it's defined as a person whom someone knows, likes, and trusts. A friend is someone who someone knows, likes, and trusts. That's the American Heritage Dictionary. The King James has a Bible dictionary, and they say one who is attached to another by affection. Oxford says mutual affection. And there are several sources that use loyalty, affection, and liking to define what friendship is, right? So when I sit back and I look at the ways that we use this term friends, it doesn't seem to fit in this category, right? Sometimes we use it as a greeting. Sometimes we use it as a way to enter into a conversation. But recognizing that we're not all on the same frequency of that can be challenging. And what's hard about that is that we assume that we are. We live in a society that says that there's only one way, right? Westernized society, colonization, supremacy says that there's one way to see the world, and that's the right way. And everything else is wrong. So if I'm using the word friend, everyone knows what that means. I'm assuming that we all understand what it is that we mean. There's a scripture that is most prominently referred to. Oh, it's only when I lean down. I should lean down more often so you can hear me, right? Like I'm okay. John 15:15, New Revised Standard Version. The verse says, I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I've called you friends, because I've made known to you everything that I've heard from my Father. The Message version, which I prefer. I'm no longer calling you servants, because servants don't understand what the master is thinking and planning. No, I've named you friends because I've let you in on everything I've heard from the Father. Now, I'm not even going to address the fact that I have challenges with some of the language in this verse, because that's not what we're here to talk about, right? We can on the other side of our friendly conversation. But what I'm more interested in is we say that there's a distinction. Jesus is making a distinction in this verse about relationship. That in order to call someone friends, there's a sharing, there's an understanding. These are words that are in Scripture. There's an understanding that's here, right? There is a connection, understanding of what we are thinking and planning, that we're on one accord. Friends. The way that we use it in society is so much glossier and fancier and 30,000 footier than that, isn't it? But when we're thinking about it, this is what we mean. And why does it matter? Well, it matters, in terms of how we're building and cultivating relationship. Because if we assume that everyone sees the world and views the world and defines the world in the same way, then we'll go about the world in that way. And we have this discord. And the reality is that that's not the way that the world works. We all come from different places and different spaces. Another buzzword I usually say is the word culture, right? Culture is a buzzword. Some people think it means race, right? Some people think it means ethnicity. Some people think it means nationality. And I'll just dare I say, depending on if somebody comes to me and says, what culture are you? I know what they're asking me. They're not asking me about my culture, right? Culture is loosely defined as the way that we do life. So I do life, I have a culture at my house, right? You have a culture at your house and a culture at your house. And there's a culture at Calvary. So you all share the culture at Calvary. There's a culture I go to the grocery store. We all know if we all shop at the same grocery store, we know that there's a way that things are done in the grocery store. Right? So we're a web. We are filled. We are surmised of a web of cultures, a complete web. And sometimes we intersect, right? Sometimes we intersect. So the way that we do life together is when somebody says to me, what is your culture? You're not asking me the way that I do life, right? I know what you're asking me, right? And so here are these buzzwords. We assume that we're all on the same page, and we really aren't. Where do these assumptions come from? I'm a big fan of using in my training iceberg metaphors. And I'm sure that you've seen them before. Many of you have, because I think that if it, even though it's been used quite a bit, I feel like if it isn't broken, we don't need to reinvent the wheel or fix it. An iceberg is, we know what an iceberg is. It is, you think about Titanic, you think about this big, huge block of ice, and, and this perspective, this assumption that what we see above the surface is all that it is. And so that's what we assume when really the majority of the iceberg, the breadth of it, the depth of it, all of the important stuff is beneath the surface. But if we don't go down and look, we have no idea. And so we are at the tip of the surface. So sometimes when I think about it from that metaphor, we live in that world. We live in a society that says, no. What's above the surface is all that there is. We're the same underneath. We're the same beneath the surface. And so we don't need to do anything different. The words that you use, she'll understand that because we're all the same inside. And the words that you use, she'll understand that because we're all the same. We all think the same, and we move in that way through these assumptions. But we've been taught this, right? We've been taught this. What is above the surface? Well, above the surface are things that we see and hear at face value. They're things that really don't require relationship, which is why a lot of times relationship, it becomes a buzzword. It really isn't something that's a priority or that we really double down on because we assume that we've done all that we need to do. Above the surface, face value things. If you're looking at me, you can tell that I'm not white-bodied. You can already tell that without even talking to me. And if you've done some research, you might have some sort of an idea or a guesstimate of what life might be like for me. But really, if we're not in relationship, you've got a whole bunch of assumptions about what life is like for me, right? Right? If I'm, depending on the type of language that I'm speaking or the food that I'm eating, right? We have these assumptions, face value, that tip of the iceberg are these things. And not only is it what we see, but it's also what we hear. If you turn on the news, if you open up the newspaper, however you read it digitally or otherwise, there's a lot of iceberg information about people, right? There's a lot of things that are taken at face value. Data that's collected isn't about people, it's about consequences of systems that have affected people. And so we see it as these are people. What's beneath the surface? Well, here's what's beneath the surface. The truth is that we know that we're not all the same inside. I just talked about the fact that we're a web of cultures. We're a web of all of these different, the sum of all of these different experiences, which means that even if we look the same on the outside, on the inside, we've journeyed in different ways. We have different value systems. Just because we come to this same church doesn't mean that we believe the same things. Some people probably appreciated my sermon. Some people might have been offended, right? Some people believed what I had to say. Some people could have thought that it wasn't true. It was untrue. What's inside beneath the surface, how we raise our children, what we believe about elders, what we believe about justice, how we believe we should handle crime. Do we take care of people who are less fortunate? What's funny to us? What defines old? What's good food to eat? All of these things are beneath the surface. But when we're sold a package deal that everything we need is at the tip of the iceberg, then we say, well, we don't need to go beneath the surface. We just know, right, at the top that this is what we need, that people have to eat, people have to sleep, people have to have water. We just know these things. And so we operate in these safe spaces because if we're honest about it, it's a lot of work to go beneath the surface. It's a lot of work. You got to spend time getting to know people and being present and, oh my goodness, being friends to a whole lot of different people. It's a lot of work to be mindful of other ideologies and other offenses. Like, if we're honest, it is a lot of work to go deeper, but really, if we stay in the surface, then that's what we have. Our surface relationships, and that's not what Jesus is talking about. Jesus doesn't call friends people who are surface relationships. Jesus trusted the disciples with the gospel. You don't trust the gospel to people who are like, acquaintances, people that you've never met, that you send an email to and say, hello, friend. This is like the fate of the world. I've got to know that you're really going to be here and you're going to show up. This understanding is here, right? That's relationship. And there's a distinction that needs to be made because in the church, capital C, the church, I always say, has worked in concert. Christianity has been used as a weapon, which we know, right, to control people. And so even in the mindset, the way that Christianity is ushered forth is we say, well, we just focus on what people, the physical things that people need. That's it. People need food, people need this. And you merge that, when we merge that with all of the messages that we hear in the media, we don't need to go deep diving. We know exactly what you need. Take one look at you. We don't need to have a relationship. We know exactly what you need. And the church that moves in this way, because of that, we can see what that looks like, how it manifests. When there are ministries that are not culturally responsive. When I'm giving, I remember my wife used to run, she has a ministry, so she helped to put together hi. That's my grandson, Kai Kai. She helped to put together a ministry, a pop-up site after George Floyd was murdered. And how many people made assumptions about, what folks needed and what they ate, what they wore. How many people made assumptions about that? I think one of my favorite stories was hearing people say, well, I don't even eat meat. And they gave me meat. I don't even eat meat, and yet here's what's being distributed is like meat. What if I'm lactose intolerant? But the fact that we're giving, there's no relationship. We're just giving. You have an opportunity to take a different path.
Amen.
Right? You have an opportunity to be church in a different way. Right? To change things, these buzzwords, to reinvent and redefine them for what it means for Calvary in your community. And part of it is being aware of what are the assumptions, what are the mindsets and the things that come when I see someone, when I see, affordable housing. What are the first things that come in my mind? Let me go, and not even any of our faults. We're all conditioned in this way. Let me go and see what are the unused cans of food I have in the back of my pantry that I can, as if, even though I don't want it, it'll be of value to someone else. What are the clothes that I'm no longer wearing? They have a couple of holes, but it's affordable housing. They'll be grateful for it. There might be a little bit of a tear. There might be a little bit, it might be a little old. There's a couple of dents in the can, but it's okay. And with that lack of communication, that lack of relationship, we have no idea. But what is the message that we send? The message that we send is that we know better. Our assumptions We know better. We know what you need. Because right underneath our umbrella, our iceberg umbrella, face value says, I know what you need. I know better than you. And so many of us, like I said in my sermon, 99% of us, 2024 is not affordable. Right? So, I mean, just to be honest with like this, it's a crisis. Like there are folks saying we're entering into a recession here pretty soon. Like this is where we are. And yet somehow, here we are as the church, and there's this edge of superiority, but you have an opportunity to reset this clock, to redefine what it means to be in relationship, right? And part of that means recognizing that all of the sweet stuff, the good stuff, takes time. We've got to dig deeper. It isn't just about food or clothes, right? It's about things it's about experiences. It's about what offends us. It's about justice. It's about what we need. It's about what we like. It's about what makes us happy. It's about what makes us sad. I almost tell people, like in the black community, and I'll only speak from the black community. In the black community, we no longer use that word friend has been hijacked so much that in order to really communicate what it should be, we had to come up with some other words. My mother and my father were divorced when I was young. My mother had to work multiple jobs to take care of, to raise myself and my two older brothers. And so I had other mothers. I had 4 women that are still in this community that committed to raising me, and they were other mothers, friends. But when you hear other mothers, right, that tells you a little bit more, doesn't it, about what's beneath the surface. That tells you that there's more than, here's the extra can I didn't eat. And I'm assuming that you can fit into these size 4s, which has been a very long time for me. Right? I mean, it's more than other mothers. There's nurturing, there's nourishment, there's care and connection. We use other mothers, we use extended family. Formally, extended family used to mean, and it still does officially, formally, right? Your nuclear family is who lives in your home. Your extended family is beyond your parents and your siblings. My grandmother would be extended family. But to communicate the relationship, we say that close friends are extended family, or fam, or aunts and uncles, right? And maybe in your culture, because we all have culture, so to say that even white folks don't have culture is a lie, right? So even the way that, like in your own context, you probably have different wordings and understandings about relationships too. But the fact that we've had to recreate these is because of this word, is because of how it has been hijacked. So Calvary has an opportunity to decide, how do you want to define relationship? What does that look like? When I open up and I look at this here and I look at some of these definitions, I see things like, again, a person who someone knows, likes, and trusts. Which means I know what's all that hard stuff here, which means we've had multiple conversations. Which means before I'm going to feed you food, I'm going to know more about you and what you need without assuming that I know that you even want food in the first place. And if I am feeding you, what is it that you need? And perhaps you're feeding me. Because also, mutual. Mutual. The church is really great at making sure that there's a superiority here. Aren't we great? We're sharing our space with these people. We're opening up our hearts to these people. Aren't we awesome? This is where we're opening this to these people, but what do these people have to share with us? Even by assuming that this is a trickle-down effect, we're already sending messages that they have nothing of value. Right? If we never invite them to share their skill sets, to share their giftings, if we never spend time and we go right into meeting needs, then we're communicating what our assumptions are. I don't know about you, but if I was living in a space that I couldn't afford, and a brand new space came available that was affordable, that was more affordable, I would take it whether I had a doctorate or not. Right? But what are the assumptions we make? Without that relationship, let's be honest, what are the assumptions we make when we hear affordable? What are they?
Uneducated.
Uneducated.
I think of living within means.
Would you say?
Living within your means.
You think of it living within your means, okay? All right. What are the assumptions that we make? Yeah. So, what'd you say? Less than, right? Welfare, financial assistance. What else?
I think of this that they have. I mean, I just think of my own family who's lived in affordable housing, and they had trauma, head trauma, or car accidents, injuries, assault, that kind of stuff that kind of waylaid their avenue of kind of what they were striving for, or whatever, but waylaid it.
Okay.
Like brain injury or something.
So assumptions that there have been derailings and trauma, those are assumptions, right? They are. Even an assumption that people are living within their means is an assumption, right? I mean, honestly, without having relationship, we have no idea, is what I'm saying. We have no idea what the circumstances are for people living in this space. It could be people living within their means. It could be people that are on financial assistance. It could be people that are uneducated. It could be people that have doctorates. It could be people that have no transportation. It could be people that have several cars, right? We have no idea what their experience is. And the reality, part of relationship building is recognizing, taking a moment, because this is going to be a two-parter, since we'll do this again in 2 weeks, is taking a moment to look at and recognize what are the biases that are surfacing. What are the things, as I'm, and not just today, but pay attention for the next couple of weeks, right? As you walk in and out of the building, as you connect and communicate with people, what are the assumptions that you hear? What are the connotations, right? I mean, nobody's walking into Edina churches and saying to them, hey, I have some dented cans if there's some things that you need. But I can bet you that there are people in Edina that would benefit from that. The assumptions that we make really can affect relationship. And so I appeal to you that before we move to acting, to assuming that it has to be about food or necessities or that we understand anything, that we pause in time for relationship. Just to get to know people without any asks, without anything, that we just take time to get to know each other. That's it. And that could take a long time, right? That could take a long time. But imagine what happens when you get to know and you find out that people have skill sets and there are ways, that there's value that people can bring to make this an authentic community, that there's value that's here, that is not one way, one directional, but that it is a mutually beneficial connection. I want to caution you. You only have one time to make a first impression. You only get one chance. And for people that have been pigeonholed and backed against a corner, there's only one strike, right? This is your chance. So before we assume, before we kind of make forward, let's pause for a minute and recognize what are we bringing, what's preceding us. Because I'm sure that just like we have assumptions, they have assumptions.
Right. So,
right?
yeah. So speaking of assumptions,
Yeah.
like I just know so many people that have been hurt by the church, right? So one of my assumptions about the new residents here is like, maybe they haven't been treated well by the church, you know? So, and like, it's understandable where the assumption comes from, but it's still an assumption. Like,
It is.
Like, I don't really know, right? So we had a new resident from here that came to the meeting at the square this morning, and she's been around before. And I was kind of having that assumption, like, oh, I need to apologize because I'm part of this church and whatever. But what I learned after just like shutting my mouth and like listening and talking is like, actually, like, I'm looking for a church. Yeah.
Right?
Right?
Isn't that exactly? But that is true. We do make that assumption.
Yeah.
Right? And part of that is an awareness that the church has hurt a lot of people. Right? Doesn't mean that the church has hurt everyone.
Yeah.
But that awareness we assume, and we assume that we're going to have to apologize. Even before we get in, we've got to kind of ask for grace even before we come in. And that's very real, because when you think about it, just like every person has assumptions. And so just as I would sit and I would say this to you, I would say to people that are residents is to say, what are the assumptions that you have as well about the church? Now, it's up to you to affirm that assumption or not. Just like it's up to them to affirm that assumption that you have or not. The challenge, though, is there's a power dynamic, right? There's a power dynamic that's at place. If there isn't relationship, I'm not necessarily going to tell you that you've offended me. I'm not going to tell you what I like. I'm not going to tell you my life story. I remember being in a class when I was in seminary, and there was an exercise that was called a four corners exercise. I'll come back because I know that you needed to finish. And there's a four corners exercise. Sherry's keeping me on time. How am I doing?
It's noon.
Okay. And there's a four corners exercise. And I'm one of 4 people of color. I don't even I'm starting to change even to say global majority. I'm even starting to change that. Because we say, right, BIPOC, we say marginalized, we say subjugated, we say lower rung. I'm already positioning myself here, but the reality is that this is a United States problem. Right? I mean, just to let you know that global majority, right? Okay, I just wanted to kind of go back to that. But here we are, as we're looking at even our connotations and the way that we address each other. Relationship. So here we are, I'm in this class, and there's 4 of us, global majority folks, that are in this class. And we are split up, so we're one of us in each group. And in one corner, there's a piece of paper. You may have seen this activity. There's one corner that says, everybody goes to that group and talk about a time when you have experienced depression. Depression or oppression? Well, I'm the only, who else, right? Talk about a time, and the thought was, and I said, I don't want to participate. Because even my story, not everyone is entitled to my story. Not everyone's entitled to know when I've experienced harm or pain or what my life has been like. That comes from relationship. That comes from taking time to get to know each other without agendas, without hashtags or check marks, but just because I think that you're an interesting person, just because I want to get to know who you are, then I share as I feel led, but that's a gift. So even if we want to cut through assumptions, we want to be careful that we're not moving toward an expectation, right? That we are entitled to someone's story or their experience in order to get it right the first time. Because when you're in relationship, mistakes are going to happen, but when you're in relationship, I know that those mistakes are in love, and we can have a conversation about it. And we can still be friends after that, right? That's the relationship, and that's when we say you have one chance to make a first impression, But once you have a relationship, that continues. We just continue to cycle through. So I am going to be quiet because I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. But I'm sharing all of this information with you because I want to give you a little bit of homework. I want for you to take the next couple of weeks, like I said, to consider what are these messages that you're hearing about affordability, about affordable housing, about the church's relationship, about what that relationship is supposed to be like. Just to spend time thinking about it. And just even as you just be mindful of what are the little thoughts that are coming up in our mind. So when we come back again in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about how we address those and what that looks like to level the playing field. But the most important, the first step is acknowledging we all have biases. We all have these ideologies and these assumptions that have been planted because we all are products of this oppressive environment. We are what we eat. We have to be aware of that. Q&A from you. Or thoughts from you.
You've talked enough.
Well, I got something important to say, but you said.
I was just going to say, thinking about what you just said, is one big thing I think we need to pay attention to is all the stories that are being told by other people, like Kara Levin and NPR and Southside Pride and all of them, and how that is being told. No matter what we say, how does it get presented and packaged, and what is the message that comes out of that? I want to go back and listen again and read again and just see like how much of a savior position is that putting us in.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And an expectation, right? And an expectation that you will rise to that, right? That is going to be the relationship, right? Because that's what has always been the relationship. And that's why there are some folks that choose not to move into affordable housing.
Sherry, I know you got something important to say. I just want to say really quick. I'm not going to talk on the mic because there's germs and I'm not doing it. But no offense. Just to Melissa's point, it's kind of, when you talk about leveling the playing field, reminding ourselves that we too are tenants in affordable housing because we couldn't afford to keep this place. That's right. And I think if we keep our mindset like that, it will help us level.
I'm going to repeat that just for the microphone for folks that are there because that's important. No, because that's important what you said. Was just to remember that, we're talking about affordable housing, that even Calvary is someone who needed affordable housing because Calvary folks couldn't afford to stay in this space. That's right. Living within their means, right? I mean, these are great. These are really important things to notice, and also to recognize too. Also, the difference too is that Calvary may have had access to more opportunity to be able to live within their means than some other people do, right? And so the challenge comes is like, what will you do with this? Now you've done this. Now what can you do with that? Right? I love that. Leveling the playing field and remembering that is, right? That's what that is. Because that's a story that usually doesn't get told. Right. What gets told is, look how generous and a savior we are because we expanded our space and made room. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that the light bill needed to be paid and we couldn't afford, you know what I mean?
That's the
yes.
I wish they would have told, and somehow we have to get them to tell that story.
I think Sarah did in her comment.
Well, and you can also tell it yourselves. You don't need to wait for other people. You can tell it yourselves. You can find a tagline or, add it to the beginning of every service. You can find a way. We're so blessed because of this space we couldn't afford. Now you know what I mean? Like you have an opportunity to tell that story instead of deferring to these larger institutional systems that are definitely, that are frankly designed to sustain themselves. Right? I mean, because churches not being able to afford their own property doesn't sell newspapers. I just want to be honest with you, The fact that people are actually being thoughtful about other people, that doesn't help with ratings. We need to make sure, so it is important to recognize that, and sometimes we have to be our own publicist. Yes, our own microphone.
Hi, everybody. So I just was sitting here thinking about our experience with the community table during the uprising, and how beautiful that was. And part of it, I talk about in my book, but part of it, Scott rightly names that, like, we just had this stuff that appeared, and we were just sharing it, and we had this, like, level playing field. Right? We weren't like these saviors giving stuff. We were just there. And we had conversation with people a lot and had those relationships. And I'm here to tell you that there's lots of churches figuring out how can they do that same thing without having the catalyzing moment, right? We had this catalyzing moment of the uprising, and it was like amazing. It was a horrible thing that happened. Right, but it was amazing time for us to be church with the people and to not be saviors. So I like to, think about hearkening back to that time and remembering what it was like to be with the people in that way, without an agenda. That's what people are trying to figure out. How do churches have relationships outside of church without an agenda?
They don't. That's why so many are leaving the church. Right? Is because there's usually an agenda.
Right.
There's usually an agenda. What is it that you need?
So we have this beautiful opportunity to continue in that vein.
Yeah. Yep.
And because of the water and what we've grown up in and how our country is, if we're not intentional about it, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and while you're passing the mic, I will say too that the agenda also, when I say agenda, any type of plan or hope, being in relationship, converting, becoming members, coming to church, not a part of the deal, right? Not a part of the deal, not a part of the expectation. That I can tell you that was a fear of people. When I was at First Cub, that was a fear. Is there an expectation that we're supposed to be? You're coming here? Are you coming? You want to do this potluck because you want? No. But look at how much that has been the deal, right? I remember even having ministry and going to churches. This was 15 years ago. And getting giving Thanksgiving baskets for folks, and churches saying, yeah, we'll give them, but they have to come to service first.
Yeah.
And I'd say that is, right? That is not, right? So even the agenda, even that piece about coming to church or being in church, that's an agenda, right? If you have to toot your own horn, there's a problem. You let your actions guide people, right? Instead of your words. Yeah, yes.
I wanted to share, I did work the food shelf, I think the second week we were open back here. And when I went home, I felt so good about what I was seeing happening, because one of the new tenant, another new tenant here in the housing, had chose to work with us down there. It was wonderful. It was wonderful to work side by side with, he received food or whatever his needs were, but he needed to give back and just be a part of the sharing. I don't know, it was just a wonderful experience. And I was just like, I got to come back here. Got to keep coming,
And that was his idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was fun.
Yeah.
But I have another question. What if in the situation where we have things to share, just excess? I have excess. Probably a lot of people in their homes and stuff have excess. I got to declutter. I want to share. I've got things of quality to give, and I do. And I like to do it mostly with relationship with people. But how do we do it here in a bigger scale, if need be, or whatever, without feeling offensive? And I probably have a private conversation with you about that too, because I'm serious. I'm in 2 action plans right now with Thrivent and stuff, so
Can
that
I
I'm
say
doing.
something to that?
Absolutely.
What I would say, if you have excess of value, right, it might be of value to you, it may not be to anyone here, take it to Goodwill. Because then people,
I don't like that they have to pay for it there. I don't like that. I liked it when we used to have a free store that we could give things of quality. I like it when I can meet somebody on the street that has less and I can give them shoes and boots and a jacket. Hey, take a bike out of the backyard, out of the driveway, out of the garage.
yeah, but I think that kind of goes back to what Pastor Gia was saying about giving people something they didn't even ask for. They may not.
No, I'm not giving without them asking, not on
I'm-
individual, no.
No, I know.
No.
I'm just saying in general, if we're trying to figure out how do we do that here, the reason that I say give to Goodwill, even when the kids were little, I didn't make much money. I've told you guys this before. Way better off now, but at that time, I was on welfare for the Trey's first few years, making very little money as a black woman anywhere. I did go to school, but still making very little money. I used to come here to the food shop, even though I was a member here. I'd come, sometimes I'd volunteer, but the one thing I used to love was being able to go somewhere like Goodwill or Value Village or the rummage sales that we had and pay for something. Because it made me feel good as a parent that I was able to buy it for my child or myself as opposed to somebody giving me a handout.
My son-in-law works at in India at a clinic for the poor, and he always says that if you give the medicine away free, it's not of value. If they pay for it, even though it's a small amount, they pay for it, then it's theirs, and they've paid for it and they're using it, and it's in any kind of situation. I think if people are paying for something, like you said, then you feel like you worked for this and it's yours, and you're not an object of charity.
Yeah.
I wrote a blog that will be coming out soon, but I wrote it during Stewardship Month. And I talked about the racism of Stewardship Month. How we turn around and we ask people for money for all of these things, and we totally bypass people, even if they can't give money. We assume they have nothing of value to give during our fundraising and our campaigning. I'm the first person to say, which is why I'm going to pause on your question, because I'm going to answer that in 2 weeks, right? When we talk about solutions. But one of the first things I say is I think about what happens with our understanding of value, where we don't even assume, why would we not expect or invite people that are in affordable housing to help volunteer in some of these places? Why would we assume that they want that for free, that they don't want to buy something, or that they don't want to serve, even if they're not taking, right, receiving, but maybe that's something that they want to do too. We assume that they're someone, and we put them in positions to be victims, right? We assume that they want it for free, that they need it. We never even invite them to contribute in other ways, even if it isn't about money. They can help and contribute. Folks can help by greeting people, right? That's a way to serve. There are other ways to contribute and give, but we rarely invite folks to participate and engage in these other ways. We go to the haves for that, and we kind of double down on this message. This is probably the reason why it wasn't published in November, because I was pretty specific, like I was in the sermon. And so it wasn't published because I'm a truth teller. And so either that doesn't always align with people's dietary lives. So but that's the truth, right? I mean, we're talking about it. What is that? And that's what I'm talking about, the biases. You don't even think about, though, and I don't like blind spots because that's, an ableist term, these growing edges, and we just assume that people don't want to volunteer. We don't even ask.
Yeah,
How cool would it be to go and put up a sign over and say, hey, we need the same announcement that you had. We need some folks. I would love to be on the other side and to give back. I was on assistance for 7 years. Nobody ever asked me. Nobody ever asked me. I went back to the food shelf that I designed myself and needed food. Talk about a humbling experience. They put what I needed in, what they decided I needed in the bag and gave it to me. Nobody ever asked me. I immediately became a person who needed. But truly, people can answer phones, open doors, greet, pass out food, give ideas, help shop. You know what I mean? But these are ways we can become and we can level the playing field. So I'm already spilling into our next topic. I'm going to be quiet.
Okay.
Yes. Anything else at all? Okay.
Well, I'll say go-go.
Go-go.
It's at 12:19.
All right, so we have to get ready to go. Go-go is Kai Kai's name for me.
So I just want to like throw one thing out
Yes.
there because you were asking about where.
Yeah.
There was a question about where to take valuable things.
Yeah, I was going to,
And there's.
Oh, I really don't need to know about other places. It just,
Well, I want people to know about this place. There's something called the People's Closet, like in George
Yes.
Floyd Square.
Yes.
And it's a bus stop that has been repurposed for clothing, and people bring stuff out there all the time, and people come and get stuff from there all the time.
You can go at any time and just drop it off.
Yep.
Anytime.
Yep.
Anytime.
Yep.
Like it's open.
It's amazing.
And there's people that will like help to maintain it and like put up hangers and put clothes on hangers and all that. It's mostly run by Jenny with
Jenny,
the freckles.
yep.
Who's my cousin because I got freckles. But Jenny Lene.
I do too, so.
Well, we're
I'm
cousins.
considering- Yeah, we're cousins.
Anyway, so that's a great resource. And I know
Yes.
one of the things that we're trying to do as a Calvary community is like nurture relationships in George Floyd Square.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to do it. I'm taking clothes from there as well.
I've done that.
Yeah, sounds good. So that's your homework. Just start being aware. Pay attention to what are the thoughts that come into your minds, what are the biases, just these things, and then we're going to talk about them in 2 weeks. But I'll see you next week for service.
Could we make it also never assume as our byword? I mean, our
Can try.
We can try.
We can try. I mean, we hope. We're working toward that, right? We shouldn't. We should never assume. We should never assume, right? Thank you so much for staying after and for being here with me. I'll see you next Sunday.
Thank you.
All right.